Today I'm here with Suniya Luthar. She's co-founder and chief research officer at Authentic Connections and professor emerita at Columbia University's Teachers College. So tell us a little bit about Authentic Connections.
Well, Authentic Connections is, I guess, to put it succinctly, an organization that's committed to fostering resilience in people's schools and communities in their everyday lives. So basically helping children, adolescents, moms, dads, teachers, professional working women, and so on, just doing what we can in their personal life settings to foster well-being, especially in the face of difficult life circumstances and challenges, which is true probably for most of us most of the time, but especially true now for pretty much everybody.
So especially now, what we're hearing from other mothers is that we are just all swimming in this anxiety, and it's almost unsustainable. So what do we do? How do we get out of it?
So, Susan, I've been studying the construct of resilience, which is, as I said, basically doing well in spite of difficult life circumstances. And I'll tell you what the single most important take-home messages from 80 years worth of research by, leaders in the field following them is resilience rests fundamentally on relationships. If you have to boil it down to one thing, what's the most important thing that is said? Strong, trustworthy, dependable, reliable, supportive relationships. So that is the single most important thing. Now, when you talk about all of us being shaky, which we are, in fact, when I talk with schools now or with parents, what I've found myself saying is, on any given day, we're somewhere between okay and unraveling. There is no I'm happy and I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful, or if it's there, it's maybe after a drink or two. Under most normal circumstances, this is where we are, and this is what we have to acknowledge. Is that fair? Right?
Yeah.
This is the state we're in. Now you add that with what I said was a fundamental take-home message. We can say, oh, Susan, do some more yoga, or do a little more mindfulness, or do more exercise. All of that's great, and it does help. But it never takes the place of having those strong, authentic, supportive relationships that can shore you up. As strong as you are, as intelligent as you are, as much self-control as you have, and emotional regulation as you have. Ultimately, we've all been humbled by COVID. We've all been humbled because the stress has been so prolonged, the fearfulness and the grief has been so prolonged. All those usual tricks stop working after a while. What we need is, just like a child, think about a child who's got a grazed knee and is in pain. What does that child want? It's comfort. That's the comfort we all need. And we need that on an ongoing basis if we're going to make it through.
So how do we do that now?
So, I've been running these groups called Authentic Connections groups. And we started them with moms and actually who were physicians at the Mayo Clinic here, physicians and other health providers at the Mayo Clinic here in Arizona. It was a 3-month program, 1 hour a week, and it's basically based on that premise that what we all need as women, as caregivers, is that same thing that we should be giving to our own kids, which is that unconditional love and support. So this program essentially makes that happen in the work setting. So women meet once a week for, as I said, for 3 months. And we found essentially at the end of the 3 months, not just were there improvements and many self-reported indices, depression, stress, feeling loved and so on, but also on self-reported cortisol levels. In lab-tested cortisol levels. And then what's more, the increases were still further apart from the control group at 3 months follow-up. So not just that they not lose the advantages were still greater. How do you understand that? Because we set in place what some of the women call this blanket of love in their everyday lives, so that the intervention itself became not superfluous, but no longer necessary. They had this fabric, they had this connection in their everyday lives on which they could depend. At the core of this intervention is this notion of go-to people. So you have to, by session 2, identify 1 or 2, preferably a 2, go-to people who are not your partner or spouse or romantic significant other. The idea being that there's enough burden on that relationship. So the job is, Susan, you need to identify at least anyone that you feel safe with relatively, and we'll start in baby steps from there. So what happens is then every session that we have, you have to come back and say, this is what I talked with my go-to person about based on the last session. Here's what I said to her or him, and here's what they said back to me. And this is the way you're sort of held accountable for developing intimacy in your, which left to us as moms, we probably would not end up doing because we're so caught up with doing everything else that we need to and have to and committed to doing. So that's where the program started.
Wait, so I just want to clarify something. So the group of women that come together are not, those people are not your people.
No, they are also your people, but the beauty is that you have, let's say, we try and keep it to 6 or under. You have the other 5 women in the group, and of course we have the facilitator. But the job is to go outside and find your go-to people. Could be your best friend, could be your sister, could be your best friend from college, because everything's done now. So people will Skype and chat with their friends in Australia and so on. But the idea is to have weekly connections, and the topics as such, Susan, that they're designed to elicit intimacy. So things like obstacles to reaching out and connecting authentically, or feelings of shame, or assertiveness in the workplace, or drowning in your children's pain. Talk about something that's relevant now. So all the topics as such that we get straight to it, to that, the very real heartfelt discussions on them. And then, as I said, the women will talk about this with their go-to people and come back and say, and then the intimacy thus grows over the 3 months that they're together.
So the idea of picking a person or 2 people who are your go-to people to have these tough conversations, and then you're giving the rubric for what those topics are, or it's self-determined?
No, it's what we talk about in group that day. So, for example, today's session is drowning in your children's pain. And we have this conversation about how does it feel and talk about the last time this happened. And the facilitators are sort of trained to keep it at not a level that one could, sort of drown in the session. So keep it at a moderate level and not have people, really get overwhelmingly distressed. Anyway, we have this conversation, and the homework is to take that conversation back to your go-to person and say, in my group this week, we talked about this. And so I talked about my experience with X or Y, and I want to know if you would share with me, please, your experience with X or Y. Now, there's no compulsion to go into a certain level of depth or intensity or trauma. It's just simply to be honest and real in what you're sharing. And thus it grows. Thus it grows. We have women, Susan, sometimes will say, but I don't have such a person in my life. So that's fine. Just start with someone you feel trusting of, with whom you feel psychologically safe. And you can take baby steps from there. And some women will start from session 2, and some will start from session 6 and say, okay, I found somebody, and I'm making my baby steps in sharing this.
And are they telling the other person that they're their person? There's an acknowledgement. Yeah.
You see this, and people ask me that, so what's the big deal? Why do you need to say, will you be my go-to person? And the answer is because it helps to define it for yourself and for the other person. So in the session that's called Obstacles to Reaching Out, we talk a lot about, well, if I were to ask you, Susan, how would you feel if I said, come on, find a go-to person and come back and tell me what you shared. First of all, find that person and reach out to that person and say, will you be my go-to person? What would you feel? And many women, myself included, would feel a little coy or awkward about saying, be my best friend. Who says that? 61, who says that? But one helps them understand. Parenthetically, let me say, I started my own Authentic Connections group maybe a month and a half ago. Talk about COVID humbling us. It humbled me and said, I think I need this. I don't think I can get through this without my own group. So I did that. So it's a question of helping all of us understand, as I said, it is as fundamental for our well-being, our functioning as it is for our children. We have to have that intimate, loving support. So this is going back to saying what your reservations are. If I ask you, Susan, will you be my go-to person? You are a good friend of mine, and we do have a trusting relationship. What usually ends up happening is the person asked, that would be you, feels honored and says, well, of course I would. So when I reached out to my group and said, look, I need to form my own group, will you come? I must say, and they know this, that I had some trepidation. So, oh goodness, what if they say, who wants to be part of this? And why would I do that? And God bless them, they all came back and said, we'd love to. And they were honored to be together. And it's, I think, frankly, a lifeline has been, and then there are more groups that started off since then. But that's the general idea. You have to define so that you are then pinned down to, you are held accountable for. And that's what the women's come back and say, thank you for holding me accountable to this, else I would not have followed through.
I have this feeling when you're talking about it that I would be more generous, that my heart would be more open if someone came and said, would you be this for me? And so I think like both of you come at it with an understanding that you're there to bolster each other, and that you like the normal dynamic of friendship is a little bit to the side because we have this other mission, which is to bolster each other.
So it's interesting you say the normal dynamic of friendship, which also brings a whole other question. What is friendship? But right, just to go back to your point, it is very much a mutual thing. The idea is not that I'm going to take care of you or you of me. This is very much a mutual thing. I call it tending by turns. And some days you're in great...
Say that again, you call it?
Tending by turns.
Uh-huh.
Some days you need it more than I do, some days I need it more than you do. That's fine, we'll figure it out. But the idea is, both of us, every time I see you, I feel like here's something good and trusting and loving coming my way, and you should feel the same, right? So it is very much mutual. But going back to your other point of it's different from friendship as usual, makes you wonder, what is friendship as usual if it's not mutual support?
Well, I think that group dynamics play into things, that when there's multiple women and there's children kind of weaving in and out of these stories, and when you just have a one-on-one, and maybe that's my own issue, but it would seem to me that it would be sacred.
I don't think it's your own issue. I think my question was almost rhetorical. There's a point behind it because you're onto something. Our friendships usually, Susan, we don't get to this level of intimacy. Another thing people say about our groups is, where women get to after their second glass of wine, or we get there immediately. So sort of cutting through all that stuff. So how are the kids and where are they and how's so-and-so doing and what happened? So by this time, you're half an hour into the 1 hour that you have together. And in these groups, it's not that small talk is not important, but God knows the rest of our lives is small talk, right? This is, as we said, sacred. It's preserved time for that. Here's another sentence, Susan, that we use. I feel seen and loved for the person I am at my core. That is what every woman feels in authentic connections groups. And the beauty is, it's not just coming from me. So I ran a bunch of groups last year before COVID. There's a paper published on it, virtually. So it's not just feeling loved and supported by the facilitator, but the real beauty is feeling that from these other women in the group. I am fond of saying that good therapy helps, but nothing heals like love in real life. So if you were sitting there, God forbid, and in tears about something horrible, you would immediately see these 3-4 other faces with such love and compassion and kindness, right there, embracing you.
Okay, so, at the core, we talk all the time about friendships for our teenagers and how that's so important. And yet what we see often in our own children is that friendships aren't always mutual. And actually there's some research done on that when they look at kids and they ask who's your best friend, that there's very little reciprocity. So is that something that teenagers can do also, or does this require?
Yeah, they can. And actually ran a sort of mini group with a bunch of teenagers in one of the schools I worked with. And yes, they cotton on to it very quickly, and they understand, just like you did. Say, I see what you're saying, that we cut through all this stuff and get real. It's a question of them feeling safe enough to get real. And that's what I meant again about ensuring integrity and so on, because you don't want them getting to a place of saying things that are hurtful to each other or hurtful about each other. So there's some management of that involved. But there are lots of people who are skilled at doing that. And it can be done, and frankly, I think it should be done.
Okay, well, Suniya Luthar, I cannot believe how calm I feel just hearing about what it could look like. I actually feel like I'm going to hang up and figure out who my people are. And I thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope you'll do that, Susan, and encourage everybody. Well, I should tell you also, I did write a little blog on psychology today that has directions on how to set up your own Authentic Connections group. So that's one thing to look up. And if people want to be in touch and say, help us get it off the ground, I'm here.
Fantastic. That's excellent. Thanks so much.
Okay, my pleasure.